The second group, which we've called the Andy group, right? The group that has internalized the critique of spirit and religion offered by modernity and postmodernity, and who's therefore living just as a matter of course, unconsciously, without a connection to religion, without a connection to spirit, not anti-spirit, not anti-religion, just not moved by it, and that there's a kind of internal sense that it's just not compelling. It's somehow part of the old world, not part of the new world, and these people, wonderful, gorgeous people all over the world, are living guided in some general sense by reason, by some general sense of ethics, some general sense of goodness, of decency. So this group is an important group of people who are making an enormous contribution to the world, and yet who very much are searching for something more, right? Are searching for something more than reason, because reason by itself is often insufficiently compelling, right, to create a life that works. Is it reasonable, right, to fight for your country when your country's threatened by Nazism, even though you might lose your life? Well, it sounds like an unreasonable choice. But what if you could actually get out of fighting for your country, no one will know, you'll live well, and have a decent and compelling life, but you just won't threaten yourself by being on the front lines of this fight in World War II against Nazism? What's going to make it compelling and reasonable for you, right, to be heroic and to be willing to risk your life for a set of values? Quite unreasonable idea. On the other hand, right, without people who are willing to actually risk their lives, put their lives on the line, right, for a larger context of value, right, the world falls apart. Let's go to the next step. Is love reasonable? Right? What would the world be like without love? But love's anything if not reasonable. Love's eminently unreasonable. Yet love and poetry, right, and music, right, and our deep bonds, right, to our family, right, our deep commitment to integrity, right, our radical commitment to search for meaning, none of those are actually reasonable. It would be reasonable, right, to actually live our lives, with a decent level of living, having the available food and sustenance that we need and the available shelter, and to just enjoy living a pleasant life. But actually living a pleasant life doesn't work for most people. It actually feels empty. It's boring. Right? People actually need a goal. They need a sense of meaning. Right? They need a sense of the ultimate. And they need a sense of engagement with ultimate issues. Right? People need a sense that life matters. So actually, right, many millions of people, right, living in this context which is not anchored in larger meaning structures, right, living in this context which ultimately is morally relative, in which reason suggests that there's no way to make a reasonable distinction between Mother Teresa and Hitler, because each one is living their own values. And how do you actually distinguish between them? How do you create a hierarchy of values? It's not necessarily rooted in reason. I remember going to the Bronx High School of Science in New York and asking the best kids in the Bronx High School of Science, New York's leading public school, to actually make a hierarchy based on reason in which Mother Teresa came out first and Hitler came out second. Couldn't do it. What they all said was that Hitler's philosophy was reasonable for him. He was able to work it out. It was based on his internal subjective principles. And Mother Teresa's were based on her internal subjective principles. And each one was reasonable based on its own context. And one couldn't be labeled as better than the other. Well, that's a difficult world to live in. Right? You follow what I'm saying? Hey, there's many reasons, right, why living a purely reasonable life actually is unreasonable. I mean, it's unfulfilling. Right? It's empty. Right? Living in a context which is meaningless, right, brings us to that place of Camus, that famous existentialist writer, at the beginning, right, of his great novel, where he says, Mother died yesterday, or was it the day before? Mother died today, or was it yesterday? And what he's saying is that actually without an ultimate sense of meaning, without an ultimate context for values that's rooted in something beyond my whimsical preference, nothing really matters. Or as George Bertrand Russell said, I'm paraphrasing, the only problem with living by kind of a reasonable agnosticism or atheism is that I can't believe, says George Bertrand Russell, that the only thing wrong with mass murder is that I don't like it. Right? And as if there's no source for values beyond our personal preferences rooted in what we think is reasonable, which differs according to every social context, and it's very difficult to create a shared sense of meaning, and it's very difficult to feel that I'm living a life that matters. And so all of the people in the Andy context are actually interested in, right, a larger frame of meaning, but one which is not oppressive, right? One which doesn't rob them of their freedom, right? One which doesn't demand that they give up their autonomy. So the question is, can a world spirituality speak to the Andy category in a way that honors autonomy, that honors freedom, that honors all the great goods of modernity, all the dignities of modernity, which are pluralism, right, and democracy, which are the march of progress, which are the evolution of ideas, right? Can a world spirituality, right, in an evolutionary context, speak in a compelling and cogent way to that large group of tens, hundreds of millions of people in the Andy category who are not opposed, but who viscerally, right, feel like the old contexts of meaning in the now religions is insufficient, but are yearning, searching for a context that can actually hold them and incorporate their core values, right, of modernity and of postmodernity, of freedom, of autonomy. So world spirituality needs to come into conversation with that Andy group as well.